Coming up with song ideas, especially good ones, seems really complicated, but today I want to show you 9 tips that I use to never run out of song ideas. I'm going to dive straight in, but I just want to mention before we do, if you are a new producer and need some good sounds, presets, and resources to get you started off on the right foot, make sure to check out our free EDM starter kit down below in the description. It's got sample packs, presets for Serum, and a bunch of PDF guides that will put you on the right path. Now, after you've picked that up, let's dive in. So the first tip is to stop believing in writer's block. Now, this is a really strange one because writer's block is a pretty common thing within the music production community, but writer's block's real only if you think it is, which is kind of weird. As Stephen Pressfield in his book, The War of Art puts it, someone once asked Somerset Maugham, which is someone he referenced in the book, if he wrote on a schedule or only when struck by inspiration. And this guy in the book said, "I only write when inspiration strikes. Fortunately, it strikes every morning at 9 o'clock sharp." Or to give you another quote, "You can't think yourself out of a writer's block, but you have to write yourself out of a thinking block." That's John Rogers, the screenwriter. So believing this is the foundation from which all the other tips and stuff I'm going to go over in this video are built upon. The easiest way to break this idea that writer's block is real is to just get in the door, you get in the studio every day, even if it's for just 5 minutes. And most importantly, don't expect every song idea is good. You have to make the trash that's going to come out of your brain onto the door and just kind of deal with it. Unfortunately, that's the only way forward if you want to become a prolific music producer. And obviously, speaking of getting into the door, this leads me to point number 2, which is to constantly update your resource library. Now, on the practical end of the spectrum, producers need to put fuel onto the fire of their idea generation workflow. If you're using the same sounds, the same things all the time, you're going to get stagnant and feel creatively stuck. It's good to constantly be on the search for a reasonable, you don't want to overwhelm yourself, number of new sounds from Splice, presets for your favorite synth, and things like that. Now, a note here, I would err on the side of trying to find more presets and samples rather than new plugins and software, because plugins and software require a learning curve, which can actually have the opposite effect where it hinders your creative process. Samples and presets don't have this problem because they're simply you load them up into an environment you're already familiar with and they produce a different sound. So if you're looking for a quick, fast way to get some more inspiration into your music, head on to Splice. Splice is great because I can search for a groovy drum loop and something will come up. 808, nah. Or a spoken word, like a cinema. Try finding sounds that you haven't explored. You can use the genre and tags in Splice or LoopCloud or whatever you're using to potentially look for completely new genres or styles that you haven't previously looked in. But let's go to number 3, which is to note down creative ideas that you have. Now, if you're ever out and about, out of the studio, and this awesome, life-changing melody suddenly comes to you, easy to lose that idea once you get in the studio. But the good news is that you don't have to lose that idea. Now, whether it's a musical idea that you're singing into your voice memos app on your phone, maybe it's a creative production idea that you note down, like I've got a huge list of production idea notes that I can reference and try out in my DAW, or whether you're using a physical notebook to write down, say, you know, a feeling or an emotion or a mental starting point for you to start composing a new song out of. I kind of like to split this process into like technical, actionable things like a musical idea, like a certain melody, and like more of a feeling, emotion side of things, which can kind of inform the actions you will take. I might have an idea to, like I've got here, try making a synth with the notes forward with a longer attack to kind of give it this delayed sound. But say I just, you know, had a really fun day out at the beach with my friends, that's more of an emotion that informs a series of production decisions that I'm going to make. I find these little one-off production ideas really good when I'm stuck in a rut, but I find the emotions or feelings a better place for starting with a song idea because they kind of lead to a series of decisions rather than just a one-off thing. Either way, when you're back in the studio, bring those things in and try them out. You're always going to get something you never got before. Okay, so number 4 is to blend 2 things that you like together. It doesn't have to be a complicated concept. It's just blend 2 sounds, 2 styles, 2 genres of music that you enjoy. For example, pop with hybrid trap, house with video game samples, or Noisia meets modular synthesis, whatever works for you. An example of this is I like to combine my love for like lo-fi indie rock, which is this great playlist on Spotify called Lo-Fi Indie, with liquid drum and bass, which is the genre of music I make. And that resulted in this track I made called New Religion, which is a nice drum and bass beat with this kind of retro guitar behind it with a bit of a gritty lo-fi feel. Now, this idea of combining two things together can be just a concept that you use to approach your production with. For example, like I mentioned, combining two genres. Or if you like to get your hands dirty, you could literally, practically, I just bring in like a nice echoing synth over the top of it. It's gonna sound probably very bad, and I might have to do some level matching. See, just like putting this over the top of my track almost gave me like a little idea for something I could do. So it's just this idea of bringing things in, even if they're not perfect, like bringing in different sounds and then kind of figuring out the specifics of how they will work together later. Okay, so number 5 is to create a musical swipe file. This is something as simple as a Spotify playlist, or you can go into your Ableton or Logic or FL Studio user library here. I have a liquid drum and bass one because I make that genre. I also have non-DnB ones for when I want to get outside of the space of DnB and kind of pull inspiration from other genres. I really like listening to like a good indie post-rock playlists for something like that. I have a all-time favorites playlist for just songs that are classic to me. If you're a melodic house producer, you might find listening to ambient music is a great way to get some inspiration for your breakdowns in between your drops and things like that. Now, feel free to steal liberally from these songs. You can steal the structure, the arrangement, even parts of the composition that you can then transform and make them your own. Because, reality is good artists copy and great artists steal, as I'm sure you've heard many times now if you've been around this channel. That's not to say you're just going to verbatim copy the track, but you can use the ideas in the track to inform exactly what you're going to do and make them your own. Okay, so number 6 is to use generative tools. Now, these are tools like Scalar 2, Captain Chords, MIDI Wizard. It can be MIDI effects in Ableton, like these tools that basically extend what you are capable of doing in the DAW. I personally, though, love to use like samples, and I will chuck an arpeggiator on, find like a nice kind of melodic sound, like something with like a pad or something. Something like this. Check on the slice mode. Let's go to slice it by beat, make the beat division a bit shorter. Or we can even go by region and just add a bunch of regions. And we can arm this track. Create these nice generative sequences based on samples. Now, the arpeggiator is simply just a way of rhythmically going through the different chops and putting them together in a way that I probably wouldn't have played by default. And this is just one of the many ways you can use generative tools like random chopping, like MIDI effects, chords, and that sort of thing. Okay, so number 7 is to use song prompts. Now, these are bits of text that are starting points to get the creative juices flowing. Now, they're not ideas in themselves. They're kind of almost little seeds of an idea that point you in the right direction when you're coming up with an idea. Kind of like noting down song ideas like on a notepad, like I mentioned earlier in the video, but instead getting them from an external source rather than an internal one. A great one I love to use is Brian Eno's Oblique Strategies. If you just Google Oblique Strategies by Brian Eno, a website will come up that kind of shows you these. And you can just click here to kind of get a new prompt. This one says disconnect from desire. And again, you have to translate what that means musically to you through different variety of techniques. Simply a matter of work. What does that mean? Maybe for me, it means I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to have it more progressive, because if I keep, a matter of working, it's going to change slowly over time. Baseline getting more aggressive. That's what I'm imagining. Use fewer notes. This is a more practical one. It's like if your melodies are overcomplicated, maybe remove half the notes and see if you can simplify it and make it more catchy. Decorate. Maybe I need to add some Foley in the background, or kind of spice up with a bit the mix with a bit more reverb and kind of fill in the gaps. There's also other websites with more practical song prompts, like writing a love song. If you're more into traditional songwriting, you can write a story of someone who's misunderstood, someone you really dislike, someone you know personally. I need help. I never saw that coming. Stuff like this can just point you in the right direction. Even if you're not using vocals, this is a really fun creative exercise, and I highly recommend you try it. Number 8 is to flex your idea generation muscle. It goes without saying that the more song ideas you come up with, the more song ideas you will come up with. This is something we did with our Create 30 students, which was a course we ran a couple years ago. It's called the Song Finishing Accelerator, which we are running very soon. I'll leave a link for that in the description if you are interested. And like physical muscles, you need to regularly generate song ideas to get them working optimally. But you also, in addition to working them regularly, need to let them rest. The issue is that producers think when I say, or someone says taking rest, that it means you can take 2 months off and never make music. But if you took 2 months off from the gym, a lot of your progress is gonna be lost. So when I say rest, it's better to take a day or two off here and there, or just go for a walk after a studio session for a couple of hours and let your mind rest that way. And having this balance of rest and work in the studio will allow you to be continually creative and not burn out and never stop coming up with ideas. And this all leads me to number 9, which is to believe that idea generation is simple. Songs don't require hundreds of layers. In fact, a lot of my songs, no more than 20 tracks in them. And that is right at the end with effects and all that added in. When it's in the idea generation phase, it might be 5 or 6. A few simple instruments and sounds will do. And this is something I've mentioned on this channel before, is to think like a band. A band can sound great with just a guitar, keys, bass, drums, and maybe a vocalist if it's necessary. In electronic music, you could think lead synth, chord synth, bass synth, drums, vocal. And that is it. That's how I never run out of song ideas. If you enjoyed this one, thank you for sticking around to the end. Make sure to check out our EDM starter kit if you do need a few resources just to spruce up your studio, give you a few things to put you on the right path to making the best possible music you can make. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.